All right, good morning. My name is Anna Fleece. I'm the Food, Ag, and Bioprocessing Business Development Officer, as well as the Food and Ag Development Center Director for the Great Falls Development Alliance. We are joined today on one of our Tuesday trainings with Alicia Love from the Department of Livestock to learn about making ends meet in the Montana State Inspection Model. This is part of our Tuesday trainings, which is a series of twice monthly trainings to bring resources and success stories to Montana's value-added ag and food manufacturing entrepreneurs to inspire more of that development in our economy. If you are watching later down the line and you're interested in learning more about resources in Montana, please reach out to your local Food and Ag Development Center, and they can connect you with technical assistance, resources, and funding opportunities that can fit your business. But we are very excited today to talk more about meat processing. Alicia Love is the Meat, Milk, and Egg Inspection Bureau Chief at the Montana Department of Livestock. She holds a Master's of Public Health from the Grand Canyon University and a Bachelor of Science degree in Applied Biological Sciences from Arizona State University. She is a registered sanitarian in the states of Montana and Arizona. Her work history includes regulatory experience in retail and manufacturing settings with an emphasis in food safety and hazard analysis critical control point. So we are so excited to have her today to talk to us about meat processing. And if you have any questions, we're going to save those for the end. And then she'll be able to answer those then. All right, without further ado, Alicia, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anna. Welcome, everyone. So I want to start with probably the most important question when we get questions about a meat business. So if you were to call our office and say, hey, I want to do a business that has meat involved in it, what do I need to do? The two questions that we want to start with is, who is your intended consumer? And where do I want to sell these products? So that's going to be kind of the focus of how we talk about these different types of business models. So we'll just keep that in mind as we go. All right. So within the state of Montana, we've got 6 different options for meat businesses. And I just kind of got them all laid out here. So let's start a little bit with some jurisdiction. So for products that are federally inspected, these can be rebranded as either state inspected. So if you are a processor who just wants to make jerky, you could buy federally inspected product and then make that jerky under state inspection. So that's allowed. A lot of our federally inspected products become retail products. So you go to the grocery store, maybe you buy some packaged steaks or something from your butcher block. Those steaks were likely originally federally inspected. So anything that starts at federal can end up being in a meat depot, at state inspection, at retail exempt, or at custom exempt processing. Similarly, anything that is state inspected, so things that were inspected by my bureau can be stored in a meat depot, they can become a retail exempt product, or they can become a custom exempt product. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with some different inspection options. The first up that we're going to talk about is federally inspected products. So these are products that are inspected by a USDA inspector. They bear that circle mark there for US inspected, and these products can be shipped anywhere within the United States. The application and inspection process is all housed through USDA Food Safety Inspection Services. So you'll hear that called as USDA FSIS. So that is for people that are wanting to do wholesale distribution. So you are selling not to the end consumer. So you might sell it to a grocery store. You might have a distributor like Cisco going to grocery stores, and it's going to be all over the United States. Our next option is going to be our Cooperative Interstate Shipping Program, or the CIS program. This also allows products to be sold anywhere in the United States. It has that circle icon again, but at the bottom you'll notice that it has the 2-letter abbreviation for the state that it came from. So that's how they are labeled a little bit differently. The application and state inspection process is kind of joint through USDA. So USDA is pretty heavily involved in conjunction with the state at the beginning stages. But then once you have a grant of inspection, it's primarily the state that will be enforcing everything, and then occasional visits from USDA. There are a little bit of limitations on CIS. There is a staffing limitation of no more than 25 employees on average, so that's a little different than USDA. And if you're a plant that wants to do CIS products and state products, you need to have those things separated by either time or space. So CIS is pretty new to Montana, so a lot of people have been asking us, if I want to go CIS, what does that look like? What kind of timeline am I looking at? So the first step is that the plant needs to have a state grant of inspection for 90 days. This is not a USDA requirement. This is my requirement for my program. And the reason for that is we want the plant to have records so we can validate your process. We want to make sure your HACCP plan is working according to plan. We want to get all the kinks worked out. We want to make sure that your program is running robustly and that you're ready to have kind of that deeper analysis by USDA and that your business is really established. So that's why we have the requirement at that 90-day mark. We'll come in and do a food safety assessment, make sure everything's going well, making sure your process is working the way that you described it to us. From there, the state is then going to reach out to USDA. You don't have to do that. We do that. We would reach out to USDA, schedule that joint visit. USDA is going to visit. If you're a facility that engages in slaughter and you want to do slaughter under CIS, then you would have a separate slaughter visit. And then the plant would have to submit their label application through the USDA website. So that's kind of the steps. We had our first CIS plant come on in September. And from their 90-day onboarding with us to getting CIS was about a 3-week process. Now they don't do slaughter, they're processing only, but it was a pretty fast process for them to get under CIS, which was really exciting for them. Okay, so those are our two options for people that want to distribute nationwide, and they're doing wholesale distribution nationwide. And that is kind of where the USDA presence kind of leaves this presentation. All right, so retail exempt. I hate when people say retail exempt because it's confusing. Retail exempt means it's exempt from Department of Livestock and USDA jurisdiction. So this is where the State Department of Public Health and Human Services becomes involved. This is where the county sanitarian has authority over your business. So these products can only be sold directly to the end consumer. So you own a restaurant, you own a grocery store. You're not distributing it with a middleman involved. So the licensing and inspection is through the health department. This follows the FDA food code instead of the Code of Federal Regulations. And then I've got some additional information there. The sanitarian map listed there. If you don't know who your sanitarian is, if you're not sure who to contact, that's an interactive map. You can click on your county and their contact information pops up. So that's a really fast way to find that if this is the business model you're interested in. Okay, so people often will ask, what's the difference between wholesale and retail, and where are these jurisdictional boundaries? There are some products that are really odd. So if your product has less than 3% raw meat, it goes retail. If it's less than 2% cooked meat, it's going to be FDA. If it's less than 30% fat, tallow, meat extract alone or in combination, it's an FDA product again. There's some really weird stuff in here. Closed face sandwiches are FDA jurisdiction. Open face sandwiches are my jurisdiction. I don't know why. No one's answered that question for me. So don't lose sleep over it. If you reach out to me and it's a closed face sandwich, I'll get you over to the right person, but just be aware there are some very small situations where you might be having a meat product that is still FDA jurisdiction. And then the last one there is non-amenable species. That would be things like farmed elk, farmed deer, rabbit. Those are not my jurisdiction. So even though they are meat, they would fall as an FDA product. Okay. Let's talk about meat depots. Meat depots is a super confusing topic that we have to clarify quite often. So meat depots is products that are inspected that are there just to be sold. So if you have a ranch and you're doing on-farm sales at your ranch, you do not need a meat depot license. You need a retail food license. So meat depots are just storing. That's all they're doing. They're just storing it. Um, Meat depots are really common licenses for people who have food trucks for farmers markets in the summer. I own a ranch. I have my meat processed under inspection, either state, federal, or CIS. I'm going to store it at my ranch, and then I'm going to take that cool refrigerated truck to the farmers market in my area and sell that meat on the weekends. That's where a meat depot license fits in here. And then if you have a retail license, you don't need a meat depot license. So as long as that place where you're storing your meat has a retail license, we'll give you a license. We won't tell you no, but it's not legally required. Okay. Then custom exempt processing. That is the business is slaughtering and processing animals for the owner of those animals. These products cannot enter commerce. These products cannot be donated to food banks. This doesn't include wild game, and this is only going to apply to animals for food. So if you have a downer cow or something and you're not planning on eating it, we're not licensing that. This is stuff that someone's going to eat at some point. And then I've got it highlighted there that these products need to be marked as not for sale because they cannot be sold. They can go back to the owner of the animal, and that's it. Okay, so we got this question early last year, and it created a little bit of confusion with people. So, yes, if someone is only doing farm kill and then delivering those animals to a custom license, our state law says that they should have a license. And I'm going to dive into this, so don't panic yet. Okay, so within USDA FSIS, there was a directive put out in 2009 that kind of clarified some expectations for custom exempt processors. This included sanitation requirements, and it discussed the requirement for humane slaughter. So people kind of panicked when they saw this. They said, oh my gosh, the only way I'm going to be able to comply to this is get one of these big fancy mobile slaughter trucks. No, that's not true. We do need to go out and see these farm kills. What we really want to make sure is that in an ideal situation, the animal will be stunned, stuck, and bled in the field, and none of the skinning or the cutting or anything will happen on farm. That animal should be going to a facility. And that way, if once they're cutting it up, we're not exposing it to dirt, to bugs, to feces that might be out in that farm field. If that isn't feasible, we've been trying to work with people on some creative ideas. Some people set up basically a large tent around the animal. So they will stun it, stick it, bleed it, and then they'll have it kind of hanging there. And they'll put up a tent around that animal to protect it from that dirt, from flies, from anything that could contaminate that meat. We would consider that to be an acceptable process as long as it's a reasonable build. I always tell people when we're doing farm kills, it's kind of a case-by-case basis on are you meeting those requirements or not? But that's the goal, is to make sure that that food isn't exposed to things that are out in the field. Okay. So one of the other questions that we got about this was, if I'm just a solo person and the only thing I do is go do these farm kills and then transport those animals, how do I get a license? Because I don't have a building, I don't have a location that I can associate with my business model. So this is how we're going to address that. So if we go out and we see animals hanging at a custom, as we do, we're going to want to verify first if slaughter is being conducted at the building. If the answer is no, we're going to say, is the employee of the facility conducting field slaughter? So you have one of your staff go out to the farm, they're the ones doing the killing, and then they're bringing it back. If that answer is no, we're going to clarify and say, did the owner of this animal do the slaughtering? And if the answer is still no, what we are going to treat them as is basically an independent contractor of the business that they're delivering those animals to. So I always tell people at this part, be careful who you do business with, make sure they understand what the laws are, because we're going to tie their conduct to the license. We're not going to specify what your agreement is. If it's a handshake deal, if it's a fancy thing that your lawyer drafted for both of you, we're not going to dictate what your partnership is defined as. It's going to simply come down to who is doing your field killing, and where is that animal going. But we're not going to delve into what those relationships have to be defined as legally. Okay, so we have, in a very short amount of time, covered all of these elements except for state inspection. All right, so states are going to be products are going to be wholesale distributed within the state of Montana. So this is, I own a shop here in town, I'm going to wholesale it to my restaurant, but it's not going to leave the state. So the application process is going to be through the Montana Department of Livestock. So if you are interested in this process, the first thing you're going to do is contact our office and say that you're interested in this. Our office staff are going to verify all those wonderful questions that we asked at the very beginning of this presentation. Make sure the authority is in the right place. Make sure that state inspection matches what your business model is. Once we verify that, we will send you the application. Once the application is received back to our office, we will reach out to the area supervisor for whatever region you're in. We currently have 3 regions. I'm hoping next legislative session we'll have 4 regions. But we'll get you in contact with who the area supervisor is. That person is going to go to the establishment and they're going to make sure that your facilities meet federal regulations. We're going to make sure that your HACCP plans exist, that you have all that together. Once that is done, there's quite a bit of paperwork that I encourage people honestly to start with. So some of the big paperwork that holds people up is making sure your water and wastewater system are in compliance. That's probably one of the biggest ones that we see. If you're not on public water or on public wastewater, make sure if it's DEQ or the county sanitarian, make sure they know what you're getting ready to do and that your system's ready to go. It's a bummer when you buy a building and then they say, nope, we don't have capacity for this kind of waste. So I always encourage people to start with that. I also encourage people to start building their HACCP plans early. You really want to make sure that those are solidified, because if your first visit out with the supervisor and they say, nope, this doesn't match, that really kind of changes all of your paperwork going forward. So I always encourage people to start in those 2 places, because those are the biggest reasons why people don't get under state inspection quickly. Once all your paperwork's good to go, you're going to submit your labels to our state label specialist. She's going to verify that those are ready. You'll get assigned a plant number. And then the last step is you get an in-person visit from me. I'm going to come walk the plant, make sure everything's up to snuff. I tend to do a really quick look at the HACCP plans, not a deep dive, but a quick look. And then as long as everything's ready, you get a grant of inspection. Okay. So we have tackled all of our inspection options, but I want to address some really common questions that we get in our office. Okay, question one. What is the cost for the Meat Depot license, custom exempt license, or grant of inspection? All of these licenses cost $25, and they're renewed annually. If you are someone who's doing state inspection, but you also want to do some custom processing, still just $25. We'll just mark multiple license types on there. Okay. If a facility wants to have a retail shop, do processing under inspection, and process custom orders all in one building, can we do this? Yes, absolutely. But you need to make sure that you have things separated by time or space. And you would have to acknowledge that there would be authority from the Montana Department of Livestock and your county sanitarian. So the county sanitarian is going to look at your retail side. We would look at your custom and state inspected side. And then I just have a little diagram on this one. We basically don't want things to be contaminated. So you could store your state inspected products on your top shelf, your retail inspected products on your middle shelf, and then your not for sale ground beef would go at the bottom. So there's no issues with cross contamination. Okay. Selling beef jerky at a farmer's market. I get this question a lot. So the establishment will need to have a retail food license from the county for local jerky sales, and then follow any farmer's market rules that the market master has. Okay. Making and selling beef tallow or beef broth, it's going to depend on if they're wholesaling or retailing. So if you're making the beef tallow and you're selling it directly to end consumers, that's a retail license with the appropriate labeling there. If you want to wholesale it, it's going to have the state mark of inspection on it, and it's going to be wholesale distributed just like a regular meat product. Okay. That was my quick tour around the licensing world, and I will happily take any questions or clarifications.
Alicia, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I feel like I learn more every time I listen to it. Olivia, before we jump into any questions you have, can we go through a couple common scenarios that I run into just with people talking? Perfect. So let's say that let's start really simply. If I want to just open a butcher shop in my small town, right? I'm not going to do any slaughter. What license would I need?
Who is your intended end consumer?
The consumer. So I guess the population, not restaurant. Or what if I wanted to have population, so like consumers and restaurants?
You would wind up with a grant of inspection and a retail license. So anything
Perfect.
going to the people eating it will be the sanitarian. Anything going to the restaurant is going to go through state inspection.
Perfect. Let's say that I am a rancher and I want to sell my beef direct to consumer. I'm going to get it processed at a state inspected facility. What license do I need as the rancher?
So if you were doing an operation where like you're going to mail them their products, let's say you're going to hold it at the ranch and then do a mail subscription service, that could be a Meat Depot license or a retail license. Retail is probably the safer bet there. If you were doing on-farm sales, it's definitely just a retail license that you would have.
Perfect. And a little out of your jurisdiction, let's say I just shot my first deer and I want to make deer sausage. Who do I need to look for to get that processed?
So wild game is not regulated in the state. So wild game processing, you are paying for a service because wild game can't be sold. It's not licensed anywhere. So maybe make sure you're doing your online reviews, ask for some references. Try and find someone that you're comfortable with their services because it's not regulated by any entity.
And then my final question is, let's say I'm a rancher and I decide to sell Olivia one of my cows. Can I get that cow custom exempt processed and give all the meat to Olivia after she's bought it prior to the processing?
So the bill of sale needs to happen before the animal is slaughtered and butchered.
But not post.
Not post. Once it's post, you're selling meat.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are some of the questions that I've run into. So I appreciate that. Olivia, do you have any
Absolutely.
questions?
No, those scenarios were really helpful. Is that generally what people do, is sell like the animal before slaughter and processing in those custom exempt type situations?
That's what they should be doing. That's hopefully what they're doing.
Excellent. And I guess a more general economic development question, Alicia, is that we've seen quite a growth, at least in my perspective, of new slaughter and processing facilities, given the, federal support for developing our supply chain. Do you think there's still room for new processors to enter the market, or are you seeing things are pretty saturated? What's been your experience?
I am still seeing, I mean, when I talk to my establishments, my slaughter establishments are scheduling slaughters for animals that haven't even been born yet.
Oh my goodness.
We're that far out. So I would say the market is not there yet from what I'm seeing. We're starting to see an increased interest in development, especially in far eastern Montana, with Montana now being in the Cooperative Interstate Shipping Program. We're starting to have a lot more discussions about people who have markets in North Dakota. They didn't want to go to USDA for whatever reason, and that's fine. It's people's choice. So there's still a lot of talk within the industry about growth. I feel like and we've got, let's see here. So we have 28 state inspected meat plants right now. We have around 130 custom exempt processors in the state. That to me shows that people certainly could expand in state inspection and have people wanting to not be restricted to these live animal sales, wanting to have a little more control over their business development if they wanted to pursue it. This is kind of going a little off stream of your question, but USDA grant money is still being released. I know Department of Ag, is still doing their grant processes. So if you are someone who is interested in having state inspection, I think there's a lot of support there. And my personal bias is I really want to see our CIS program grow and expand and help these small businesses reach to a market that's broader than just the state of Montana.
That's such a good point, Alicia, because we have 1 million people in Montana, and while we might have 2 million cows, just from all of our food business studies, 1 million people is not enough to really grow a business on. You need to start targeting some larger, denser markets. That we do have amazing beef. So
yes, we do.
All right, one more question. If I'm a custom exempt processor and I want to move up to state inspected, how difficult is that process? Besides, you outline kind of the steps of it, but is this like a year's worth of time, $1 million of investment in new equipment?
It completely depends on what you're starting with.
Yep.
So if you're a really small custom facility, maybe you don't have a really solid slaughter floor, that can certainly be a problem. It so depends just on what facility you're starting in. I think a big hurdle for custom to state inspection is getting that HACCP plan, you don't have to be HACCP certified. I always remind people of that. You can have basically a contract with someone who is HACCP certified to write your HACCP plans, so that they can be approved. That's an option. But oftentimes business owners want to get their HACCP certification and write their own plans, so they're very specific to the business, which I always encourage. There are some private contractors in Montana that all they do is write meat HACCP plans for facilities. There's some really great ones. There's some that we've had more struggles with, but that's always an option. So I've had, I'm trying to think, we've had one of our more recent plants that came on started as custom. He opted to have a third-party contractor do his HACCP plans. And it was a pretty fast process for him because his facility was well built. His septic system was approved and was ready to go. And it was sized out large enough that he could reasonably control that growth of wastewater. So for him, it was a really ideal situation. For some other plants that have reached out wanting state inspection, the road is longer, and they've really had to utilize the grant money that's out there to pretty dramatically improve their facilities to get it ready for state inspection.
To anybody listening in on this, please reach out to your local Food and Ag Development Center. They can put you in touch with resources, both for the HACCP, writing the HACCP plan, but also funding the HACCP training, as well as connection to those funding opportunities as well. All right, Olivia, any other questions?
What would be, and maybe you already mentioned this, but like what would be a good place or person to send folks who have questions about this? Is it just a website or the county sanitarian or?
So I would say that if they think they want to wholesale it, I would definitely encourage them just to call our main office. I always tell people you're welcome to call me, but it says right on my voicemail, start with Olivia. She's the one that's going to jump into it and start getting you the paperwork right away. So I'm always happy to take those questions, but I always say right now our admin is Olivia. She's a rock star. If you're looking at getting a state grant of inspection, custom license or meat depot license, start there. If you want to do retail sales, I would definitely encourage them to go to DPHHS's Environmental Health and Food Safety website and utilize that Find Your Sanitarian button if you don't know who your person is for retail.
Great question, Olivia. All right, excellent. Alicia, thank you so much for your expertise and taking the time to share that with us. Olivia, thank you so much for joining. And for everybody else watching this later, you've got a bunch of resources as a meat processor in Montana. And so it's really use them early and use them often. But thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.